Today's conversation challenged a lot of things we casually accept in business. I sat down with Angelique Rewers from BoldHaus, and we talked about why most sales tactics are broken, why content is king might actually be bad advice, and why real conversations with decision makers matter more than any clever funnel. We get into authenticity, short-term thinking, and what happens when you actually build a business that can survive without you in the room. Welcome to Constructive Interference. Today we have Angelique Rewers with us with BoldHaus. Welcome, Angelique.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Pleasure having you. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your business, your continuity plan. But before we really get into that, I want to talk about something that caught my attention as I was doing a little recon. I came across something on your website. It says disruptive insights, unapologetic delivery. What does that mean? Because that resonated with me. I like the disruption part of it, obviously with constructive interference, which, by the way, you were one of the only people that knew what that was because you said you're kind of a math geek. But of course, having that physics term of you understood the amplification, the metaphor that I was using. But when you said disruptive insights, that set with me. I'm like, okay, I like being a disruptor. I love companies that are disruptors. So tell me what that means to you.
So for us, it's about having the courage to say the contrarian thing that needs to be said, looking at whatever's happening in the marketplace and asking ourselves, does that actually make sense? Because most of the things that go on in the marketplace as a whole are pretty stupid. I mean, they really are. And, we're very much in the space of marketing and sales experts. And having been a Fortune 500 decision maker where I sat through thousands of sales pitches and 99.9% of them were horrendous. Like, why is this the process? Why is this how people are selling? Right now I'm getting these prospecting emails all day, every day in my inbox, and I'm looking at the language that people are using. It's so disingenuous and it's spreading like wildfire. And so really what we've done for 19 years now is speak the truth about how you actually form relationships with leaders inside organizations, how you actually market successfully if you're a David selling to the Goliath. And a lot of times we have gotten a lot of pushback out there on things. And it's okay, because ultimately I like to save the pushback and save the receipt on that, because 2 years later, everyone will be saying what I've been saying and my team has been saying all along, and now everyone's on board with us. So to me, being disruptive is not being in the echo chamber. It's not repeating the things that everyone is repeating. And I'll just give you an example and then we can move on. This idea that content is king, I think, is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. Almost every business that's working with organizations, the thing that is king is actual conversations with the decision makers. And your goal should be creating those conversations the fastest, least expensive way that you can. Now, if content gets you there, that's great. I'm all for it. But don't tell me that content is king. The conversation with the decision maker is king. So we're not afraid to essentially take whatever the discourse is that's out there and call bullshit. Oh, am I allowed to say that? Call BS on that.
You can say bullshit, bullshit. It's good. You're good.
I'm going to call it as I see it. And I think we've been doing that for 19 years now.
And I think having the courage to, I like that unapologetic delivery and saying the things that push people out of their comfort zone. I think so many people are, I think that's the difference between someone like you and I versus a lot of the other people out there. They like to stay safe with what they know. They find comfort in what they have already been doing or what's always worked for them. But you said something that's interesting in terms of, especially the way I see the explosion of AI and all these things that are being automated. And I think it's an absolute gift in technology and streamlining things. However, there is a reversion to the mean of people are now starting to crave authenticity. because everything is
Oh,
just so perfect. Every these email deliveries and the wordsmithing of everything is so easy. And so, but even some of the videos with these deep fake videos, it's like, I know that's not real. So when you get on a podcast and you're making mistakes and you're saying, "Oh, am I allowed to say bullshit?" I mean, I love these things that it's like people are
yeah.
really craving. Like, just talk to me like I'm a real person, and that is the connection, and that's the relationships that I think you're talking about when you're saying content is not necessarily king. It's the relationships. It's the making the connection with the decision maker.
Yeah, and so, oh my gosh, there's so much there to unpack. So first of all, trust is already plummeting. Consumer trust
Right.
in the ads that they're seeing online, the data is already pouring out around the fact that consumers aren't trusting what they're seeing because they know that AI is already manipulating everything. So authenticity, real life interactions will certainly rise to the top, because if people don't experience it for themselves, they won't necessarily believe it. And in the case of saying content isn't king, part of the problem is that when we put something that's cute out into the market, like content is king, then all of a sudden you have all these entrepreneurs in the world, all these small businesses in the world, that they are now focusing their eyes on content. That content is the goal because we said that is king. So now we are doing what we call getting a bunch of gold stars instead of gold bars, meaning they're putting all these little gold stars like our teachers gave us on our papers because we did all this work. But the gold bars being, but is it actually producing results and profitability for our business? So we have to be really careful, because we can, one of the things that a mentor told me 15 years ago that's so true is, if we aren't consciously rejecting an idea. So something's coming in at us and we're not consciously thinking, is that right? Is that really true? And consciously thinking about it, then subconsciously we're just agreeing with it. And we live in a world right now where we are taking in content from people on LinkedIn and TikTok and Instagram and podcasts and YouTube and email newsletters and AI created ads. And we're taking it in and we're taking it in. And there really isn't critical thinking around, wait a second, who is this person that's even giving me this information? Do they even know what they're talking about? Who is this person? Is this accurate information? And we're just, I mean, I hate to say we're getting kind of dumber, but we're getting kind of dumber in ways. Like, we have more information than we've ever
We're
had,
getting
and
complacent.
yet
Yes.
complacent, and but less critical
Right.
thinking, less problem solving, less sort of pumping the brakes. We're
Mm-hmm.
just kind of in a place, and I think it's dangerous. I really do, especially for business owners.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredibly dangerous, because you are ultimately, the buck stops with you.
Mm-hmm.
If your business does well, your business doesn't do well, that's on you. I don't care who you heard talk on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, you're the one who's holding the bag.
No, no. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about how you solve that with your business. You've identified a great
Mm.
problem here that's worth solving, but
Yeah.
I want my audience
Yeah.
to know a little, and I want to know a little bit more about you. And I think one of the best ways
Yeah.
to learn about someone is to ask them about what their pet peeves are. Personal pet peeves, the things
Mm.
that trigger you, that just set you off, that you just cannot stand. It can be something
Oh.
as simple as people smacking their gum, to people leaving a small tip,
I
or people slow
love it.
walking in a parking lot. Whatever it
Yeah.
is, I'm just curious.
Yeah. So for me, the first one that immediately comes to mind are really bad cold outreach sales tactics.
Hmm.
And they've exploded as of late. And so it's driving me up a wall. One of the things that is just a huge pet peeve of mine, and this tactic has been used for 30 years now. It's been used since I started in the corporate world, where you will have a salesperson reach out to a busy business owner or a busy decision maker inside of an organization, and they'll say, if you're not the right person, can you tell me who the right person is? Which is just, I mean, my blood
It's cringe.
boils. The audacity to take your responsibility to figure out and do the homework, especially for the last 15, 20 years when we can
Hmm.
go to LinkedIn and figure it out for ourselves. But to ask a
Hmm.
prospect that you have no business asking. The same thing with discovery prospecting emails that you'll see on LinkedIn, where someone says, I'd love to meet with you and hear if there are any challenges we can help you with. How dare you ask that question? You have not earned the right to ask a busy decision maker to take their precious time to tell you what you should sell to them. And now the big one is these fake podcasts that are out there, which are not what you and I are doing, but these folks who keep saying that there's this new podcast. And
Hmm.
really what they're doing is they're throwing them up on YouTube, but just for short amounts of time, but they're using the podcast interview as essentially a red herring
Hmm.
to have a discovery conversation with the decision maker, because they can't land that discovery conversation in an authentic way. So it's that stuff. As a former leader, as a person now who leads a company, when I get those prospecting emails, there is nothing that makes me
Well,
angrier.
I can
It's
see that it
such a
triggers you. I see the passion that's coming from you right
I
now.
am just
So I
like,
think
do
that was,
not do that. I mean,
I think
because
I got
yeah,
it
it's
on
the
that one.
worst. Like I should, maybe I should write a book on all the things not to do.
So that's in business, but what about personally? What's something that you'd be, maybe
You know,
what other people do?
I think personally, the pet peeve of mine, the biggest pet peeve of mine is when you're out somewhere and you encounter folks that have, what is it called? Main character syndrome. And they feel that everyone and everything around is actually just, we're essentially extras in their movie, and they're very entitled to the rest of the world has to conform to what would be a perfect ideal scenario for them. I was at an event a couple of months back. I was there speaking, and there was an attendee at the event who just every single session had a complaint
Right.
about that. And I happened to be where, like, and it was just like, oh, this isn't your movie.
But it's
And
almost like a complaint.
customization.
It's almost like saying, like, I need to be relevant. I need to ask a question, the most clever question in the room, so everybody knows how smart and relevant I am. And that,
Yes,
so
yes,
okay, and that's a
exactly,
good one.
Rufus.
That is a
Yes,
good one because
yeah.
there's always that, and especially the rooms that you and I go in. It's very common to have that at least one or two of those people in there. Okay. And I try
Oh
not to
my
be
God.
that person.
Always,
If I have a question,
always.
I'm genuinely curious, Angelique. I am. So don't take it as I'm
Yeah,
trying to suck the energy out of the room and play my own movie.
exactly.
So
Right. That's the thing. Like you and I, like we really wait to ask a question when we really have something that we need clarity on in order to move forward or be able to put that into context of our business. But you always have those folks either at the restaurant or
mhm.
at the
Oh yeah.
mastermind or at the conference or even nowadays on airplanes.
Oh yeah.
And the folks who, the entire flight gets diverted
Yes.
because they need everything to accommodate them. And I do think that there's an epidemic of that going on a little bit in today's world.
Well, yeah, it's like yeah. Well, I mean, I guess with the everybody putting their life on their best moments on Facebook and Instagram and so on, that when you're away from it, you need to like have that filler. I guess I don't know, but all
Yeah.
right. So the reason why I asked that, and it's fun to ask because people get triggered and emotional, and that's what I'm trying to invoke is kind of see what gets you fired
Yeah.
up. Because if you flip
That
it,
gets me fired up.
if you flip it and you look for the antithesis of what that pet peeve is, it tells me what your values are, what your core values are, if you've
Yep.
ever thought of it that way. So I kind of look at that and I say, okay, if these are the kind of people, the people that suck the air out of the room, the people who exhaust you, um, I think you flip that. What do you think that core value is that they're violating?
I think the core value is the greater good.
Yeah.
Really understanding our role in the greater good, and that
Or
we have a
respect of other
responsibility.
people in the room, or respect for
Exactly.
it's not all about you.
Yeah.
So I think respect
Exactly.
is a very
Yeah,
core value of yours, if you have ever really thought of it.
it is.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah, I think that's a very true statement. And that doesn't mean that you can't challenge authority when
Mhm.
authority needs to be,
Yeah.
but it's just the common respect
Yeah.
for one another. And it is really mind-blowing
Mhm.
sometimes when you are in a space, a shared space with others, and someone's being,
Yeah.
the word I would actually use is in fact disrespectful to everyone else. So I
Yeah.
think respect is it, because I would say you're being so
Or mutual
disrespectful to
respect.
everyone
I've
else.
given you the courtesy of
Yeah.
my respect that you're in this proximity of me. I want it back. I expect it back. So when you look at those pet
Yeah.
peeves as a violation of something that you hold value, that's why it triggers us.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was fun.
Yeah, that is really, that's such a great, I never thought about it that way. I never kind of flipped the coin that direction, but 1,000%, I
And you got to
agree
think
with
about
what you're
it that
saying.
way
And
too.
mutual respect is important.
Yeah, and I think you look at it as even when you get angry at certain things. I mean, you look at anger as a secondary emotion, and it's usually something's being triggered. That anger is just a
Oh yeah.
response to some other value that's being violated or
Yeah,
some
some
need
other
that's not being
value
met.
system.
Right, right. So
Yeah, I
anyway,
think that's true. And I do get, yeah, I think that's true. It's interesting. My husband has a core value around equity
mhm.
and fairness
Yes,
in relationships. And it's interesting in business to kind of watch when he gets triggered by that. And I think for me, it is the respect piece,
yeah,
because there's really nothing that you can do to me more than show me disrespect
hmm,
in terms of breaking a relationship.
right.
So that is very, very accurate. Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, but
Well, thank you for
that
sharing.
sums me up in a nutshell.
I got you in the box now. Now you're allowed to have other values. I
I
mean,
like it.
but
I
that's
like it.
just one of the ones that that we draw a line on.
It's good.
So when we kind of pivot to back to your business with this, um, I find instead of you going through all the ins and outs, and I've looked at a lot of the stuff. I mean, you have a lot of different things, and I'm going to go into a few of those, but just for simplicity purposes, if I were to refer you someone, who would I be looking for, and what would I say to them?
Yeah, you would be looking for the professional services provider of a boutique firm,
Mhm.
some type of professional service, and they are a David that is working with Goliaths of
Okay.
some sort. So whether that's corporations, mid markets, universities, nonprofits, but they're a David working with a Goliath. And you would say to them, if you want to really master the relationship building with senior decision makers and maximize your lifetime client value with those organizations, you really need to speak to Angelique and her team. That's what you would say.
So it's almost as if someone was in that cycle of fake it till you make it, and then they come to you and says,
Mm.
"I'm tired of faking it. I'm already here. I need to rise to the level that I can either promote myself at a much more professional level to stop being the David in disguise, or the Goliath in
Mm.
disguise. I'm really the David that needs to become the Goliath kind of thing." I mean, is that where you're kind of bringing them up a level a bit?
Yeah, I mean, some of our clients certainly want to grow. A lot of them, though, want to be the boutique firm. They want to be that specialist firm. They don't want to be an Accenture or a Deloitte or even a mid market. They enjoy being that boutique services provider, working on the projects that are really perfect in their wheelhouse. So they don't necessarily want to be the Goliaths themselves, but typically when folks come to us, it's because they don't like the sales tactics that they've been taught previously, because they feel very inauthentic and manipulative, and they just don't feel right to them. Or they are tired of having too much churn with their clients. So they might go in and work with a client and get to the end of an engagement, and then that client moves on, as opposed to really having a strategy way back when that really cultivates much longer term relationships with their clients. The other big one that we find a lot of folks coming to us for is because they're spending a lot of money and time on marketing tactics, but those marketing tactics aren't turning into conversations with decision makers. We had a person come to us once, Rufus, who had paid essentially a cold prospecting company to set their firm up with decision makers in organizations all over the planet. And in the course of a year, they did 800 getting to initial sales conversations, sort of the initial 20-minute, 30-minute
Right.
sales introductory call, right? They did 800 of them. And at the end of the year, 0 of those conversations inside of major companies. I mean, these were conversations with major companies. But at the end of the year, they had converted 0 of those conversations into business for their firm.
Yeah, I would have done
And we
something
took
around
one
the
look.
400 mark. I don't think I would have waited till 800.
But they went, and to their credit a little bit, because I do think sometimes that business owners want instant gratification and you need to stick with a strategy to finally get there, right? But with that said, I agree that was a lot. We took one look at it though and knew right away it was going to be a problem. Just in the way it was structured and the way the conversations were being set up, essentially it did exactly what it was designed to do. When I looked at it, it was written and structured just to create intrigue in the decision makers. So essentially curiosity was the hook. So a bunch of curious decision makers got on a call and were like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But that's what that was. It was just essentially a curiosity fishing expedition. But if you bait the hook with just curiosity, what you're going to get back is a bunch of people who are curious, but don't really have any urgency inside their organization to move forward on XYZ. So, we have folks come to us in those kinds of scenarios, or they're putting content out, or they're speaking at conferences. They're doing all the stuff. They're doing all the stuff that everyone says to do. And they're like, but why isn't it working? And usually we know why it's not working. And so that's really when we step in and say, well, yeah, we see you going through the motions and checking the box of these marketing tactics, because look, any marketing tactic can work. Any marketing tactic cannot work. It's usually the substance within the marketing tactic that is the problem. So it really doesn't matter if you start just swapping out one marketing tactic. If you go from webinars to speaking in a room, but you're doing the same stuff that didn't work over here, and now you just move it over to LinkedIn or move it over to an in real life stage or to a prospecting email, you're just shoveling the same bad problem from one marketing channel to the next. So, I think our secret sauce is that I really am a decision maker whisperer. That understanding of really how to think like a decision maker, why and how they take action. I actually just gave a session at CSCMP, which is a huge supply chain, an amazing supply chain organization. And they had me come in and do a session on what's on the minds of corporate CEOs right now and really try to teach the audience how to think like those executives. So yeah, I think that's kind of our
I was
thing.
going to ask you that next. Like, what is that different differentiator? I mean, there's many different firms like yours out there, but there's only one you. How are you? I mean, obviously, they're trying to get into their end user and to their clients. You obviously are separating yourself and making the connection to say that, hey, choose us over everyone else. I mean, I guess that would be more it, is that you feel you're the CEO whisperer, or you have the insights of how to make those connections happen. And you do this.
Well,
No, I was going to say, you do this from a
Well, I was
marketing
gonna say,
standpoint or a consulting or sales training or.
so we do training and consulting. So that's sort of our two buckets. We train people. We're much bigger believers in teach someone to fish versus getting the fish for them. I think part of what makes us different is that we work with a very specific group in the marketplace. Working with those boutique service providers, those are business owners who are doing the delivery as much as the selling. And what I mean by that is if you're, let's say, a 10-person corporate training company, or you're a 12-person leadership coaching company, or you're a 20-person digital marketing agency, or whatever it is, and you're going into companies, you as the owner and the founder of that company are also going to be involved in that client relationship. You're doing the selling and you're doing some of the delivery. I'm not saying you're doing all of the delivery, but if you're a 15-person PR firm, I can promise you as the owner and founder of that when you land that client, you're going to be involved with that client. They're going to know who you are. You're going to be checking in on the client. You're going to have that relationship. You don't have a sales team that are just a bunch of hired guns on payroll that are doing outreach and selling. You're selling as the business owner on work that you truly believe in and that you're going to be intimately involved in inside that company. So it is a very different psychology of sale when you are the business owner, not Joe the salesman.
Right.
And so that is part of why us, because we actually get what it's like to be the boutique firm, because I was that, selling into companies. And just psychologically, it's very different. That's number one. I think number two, because I am so jaded. Like, I will look at 99 ways to say something and tell you all 99 sucks, and we're going to have to still find a better way to say it. It's like, I don't believe in most of the stuff because I've been the decision maker who gets the stuff and goes, that is ridiculous. Delete. So having sat through so many sales meetings and all the traditional things, I really like to take a very the human side of it. I know that gets thrown around and everybody says it, but we actually mean it. and one of the things too is to understand that you actually, as the business owner selling to an organization, you have to actually mean everything that you say. I mean, that's the part of sales, I think, Rufus, that people still don't get. You can write whatever you want in an email, presentation, say whatever you want. But if your energy in any way defies that, it gives you away that it's fake. And I think that you talked about this earlier, the authenticity that has to be true today when you get to connect with a decision maker, and they know right away if you're trying to sell. But if you're not trying to sell and you're coming from a place of service, which ends up selling way more than you ever could if you were just trying to use that as a red herring. But if you actually mean it, it's unbelievable what it does when you actually give a shit about your clients and your prospects, and you really are just trying to educate them and serve them. Your business explodes when you come from that place of authenticity.
You can ask anyone that works for me, what's the one thing that keeps me up at night? What makes me irritable? What makes me stress out at work? It's anytime I feel that I've overpromised and underdelivered. So anytime I think that, it's that integrity of saying, I put my name out there. I said I'm going to do this. If I underdeliver, or if I come across with bad service, or you have a bad experience, that's something I take very, very personally. And it blows my mind how many businesses it's not even on their radar. It's like, yeah, I'll just say whatever.
It's not even on their radar.
Whatever. Yeah. So that's the big thing.
It's transactional.
That's a tough one for me. And that's where I feel out of control sometimes if we're not delivering on my promise or the brand standard that I've created this image. Now, I know the images in my head are not real. They're perfect. They're just ideals. But we are always striving for that ideal. So I'm always going to have somewhat of that feeling, but I think that's healthy to feel that, okay, I don't want to get too far behind on under delivering. So therefore I need to overcompensate and over deliver and give more value. So that's, anyway, it's good to hear you say that. Now,
Yeah, I can't agree more with that. I'm glad that you think that. I feel that way too. And I said to one of my team members the other day, man, I wish more business owners got that pit in their stomach when something
mhm,
wasn't exactly up to the level they wanted it to be, because we would all have better
right.
experiences if people really cared.
hmm
Yeah.
and so even going back to pet peeves for me, one of the things in business is short term thinking, just small mindedness. The
Mm,
decisions that you see people kind of come to, and like, you don't see the bigger value here. You don't understand that if you make me happy here, I'm going to make you really happy long term. Why not make the small investments in the relationship, in the experience? And don't you see how that would come to you tenfold? And people just don't see that, and that's just such a no-brainer. Uh, but it's all around us, Angelique. It's all around us. The small-mindedness, the short-term thinking,
so
and the
true.
inability to see the long term. And I guess that's what makes
Yeah.
us successful visionaries and entrepreneurs. And
Yeah.
other people aren't. I mean, I think that's. I mean, Michael Gerber wrote the entrepreneur E Myth, right? The E Myth, and says why
Yep.
80% of businesses fail. I don't think he touched on that part of it. He didn't touch on the small mindedness of people. So he talked more about the managerial and the leadership side. But
The penny wise, pound foolish mentality that comes in. You know, we'll have folks sometimes say, well, am I going to charge for doing X, Y, and Z? And my response is, you know, we might say, use this as a strategy. And they'll say, am I going to charge the prospect for that? I'm like, are you crazy? I mean, you're talking about maybe having 90 minutes with six
right,
leaders from an organization, their undivided attention. No, you're not going to charge for that. That is gold to
right.
you. That is priceless to you.
But you got to let
So,
them know
yeah,
that
I
it's value, because they won't know it's value unless you tell them it's value.
a thousand percent. But just, you know, it's just interesting that, you know, that thinking that we're in. And part of it is because so many of the things in our life today are so transactional. We don't go down to Main Street to get all the things we need. We're just buying click, 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 click on Amazon or
Right.
Shopify, or
That makes sense.
right, it's just click, 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 click. And so it's very, very transactional.
hmm
It's, you have to be very conscientious, very
hmm
thoughtful, very purposeful to come up out of a world that all day every day is treating us like a transaction,
Yes.
and flip the switch and make sure that you don't treat your customer base, your clients transactionally. I think one of the metrics that we're probably most proud of at BoldHaus is the longevity of our community.
hmm
You know, we have people in our community who've been in our community over 12 years, 15 years actually, as I think about, I'm aging myself. But when we think about just the longevity of our community and the people who just stay and come back, and you know, even this year at our annual gathering, we had people that we hadn't seen in 7, 8, 9 years, but they were like, you know, my business kind of went in a different direction, but I've always stayed a part of what you were doing. And I'm so glad to be back again. So it's just that longevity piece. And I think that's a metric that more businesses need to pay attention to. If they did, then that place of coming from service, of continuously investing into the relationship, in making sure their customers or their clients, depending on who they're working with, really feel seen.
And I think that's it. Investing in the relationship, and I think it's fair if you invest in a relationship, you can start to look for a return on that investment at some point. And I think two truths can exist at the same time. You can still give good service without any expectation, but I think there's I think that's where people get their mind is not right, is that they're looking at it as an expense and not as an investment. When you look at it as an expense, it's a sunk cost. It's like, okay, well, that hit our bottom line, versus it's an investment. Okay, well, this is going to actually hit our top line. So people don't really think in those terms. But you said something there. You said our community, our community. Are you talking about your
Yep.
customers and your clients?
Yeah, so we have a membership community. So we have something called the Collective,
Mhm.
which our community stays in. It's about couple. Well, I actually probably shouldn't say the full number. It's big, but just for competitive reasons on the record, but it's large.
Hmm.
And so that community is global. We're all over the world. And so these are folks who are getting all of our updated training on B2B marketing, B2B sales, scaling professional services firms, on an ongoing basis. So they are our core community. And then we have our larger community that comes in. They sign up for our annual growth summits and things of that nature. So that's sort of that's the main way that we go to market, is through our training program called the Collective.
Hmm.
But that community has been growing for over a decade now. I went fully in this direction. I sort of accidentally fell into it in 2006, 2007, and went fully in this direction in 2013. So we've been doing this a long time, and we have folks who came to our very first growth summit back in 2013 who are still a part of our community today.
Good. Now, how is it? How did you come about learning this about yourself to where you said, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be in this industry. I'm going to do this as a career.
Yeah, that was completely by accident. I spent about a decade in the Fortune 500, and
Hmm.
I had very interesting roles by accident. I shouldn't say by accident, but just by the nature of the roles that I was in, I ended up being a special projects person, getting pulled into the big special projects. I was in charge of things like internal communications, financial communications, marketing communications, PR, media relations, things of that nature. But also, what happened, honestly, the very first day I was in the Fortune 500, it was really a Fortune 100 company at the time. The CEO's executive assistant was gone, and he needed help with special projects. And I started backfilling, and I ended up being a version of a special projects person for about 5 years, in addition to everything else I had on my plate in that role. And then the same thing happened in the energy industry. I worked in the defense industry. I was always in the blast zone, whether we were going through an IPO or a global rebrand or a major ERP implementation or the whole Vision 2020 thing that hit organizations, to mergers and acquisitions and failed mergers and failed acquisitions and crisis communications and just all the things that happen in the corporate world. I was in the middle of all of those things. And I was literally in the boardrooms for the discussions. You see like in the White House, everyone's sitting at the big round table, and there's a row sitting behind of all the people who have to actually implement and do all the work. Well, that was me in those boardrooms for 10 years, being like, and I say in the blast zone because that's the only other way I know how to describe it. And so after about 10 years, I was so fed up because I was leading all sorts of initiatives, dealing with all sorts of stuff. And I had been hiring over those 10 years. I was always hiring outside consultants and everything else under the sun to help us get done all of the things that we needed to do. And one night it was probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, because it was one of those all-nighters. And I'm signing off on these checks for these outside firms, PR firm here, consulting firm here. And I'm just signing off because the AP, they want my sign off as the decision maker before they issue these checks. So I have to give the approvals. And I just wanted to throw up, because I'm looking at the financials that I'm signing off on. I know what I'm making at this point in my job. I'm the one in the office at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I also know that half the time, more than half the time, 80% of the time, when they turn their work in to me, I'm having to fix it before I can take it upstairs to the top floor, back to the CFO or the CEO, and say, okay, here it is, right? So I thought to myself, why don't I just start my own consulting company? So I did. I started my own consulting company. And at that point, I was focused on transformational communications for the C-suite. So I was working with huge companies that were going through some type of internal transformation, and they needed to get their tens of thousands of employees and other stakeholders on board to go to with whatever this transformation was. So that's what my firm was doing. And I ended up getting invited to speak at a women's entrepreneur conference, and I didn't want to do it. I kept telling the woman no. I didn't see any role for me at this event. And then she took me out to lunch and told me she had already promised people that I would be speaking.
Okay.
So I decided to do her a solid and go ahead and go speak at this event. And the audience essentially hijacked my presentation. So she had asked me to come talk about some topic over here. But when she introduced me, she said, Angelique's firm is doing all of this work, and these are the brands that our firm is working with. And as soon as we went to break, I just got mobbed by people who just wanted to know how in the world my firm had this unbelievable client suite, how as a small firm, we were doing all this incredible work with these organizations. And I just kind of kept dodging the question. I was like, oh, I thought, and they're like, no, we don't know. So please tell us. And there were about 3 or 4 people from that event who were so persistent in their following up with me. One even showed up at my front door. I kid you not. She knocked on my front door. I was so embarrassed because I was in PJs. It was noon and I was still in my PJs, and I wanted to just like glasses on, no contacts, no makeup, in my pajamas. And I opened the door and she's standing there. She's like, I'm not leaving until you agree to give me some coaching on this. And so I didn't really know back then the term side hustle.
Uh-huh.
But it just kind of started out as a side hustle. And then,
It's funny how, I think I can relate to at least the, I don't know, the dismissive of our unique abilities or our geniuses or the things that just come so easily to us that, how do you not know these things? And that, and think about my business. Okay. I've been doing this 30 years. So it's like rinse and repeat. They're not making a whole lot of new stuff of what I'm delivering to my clients. So it's just one of those things where it just comes so easy. So sometimes I have to, when I go back to the fundamentals, I'm like, oh, wow. I remember how I felt the first time I learned it. That's exactly how they're feeling. Even though you've done it for 30 years, this is still the first time they're hearing this. But some of the connections that I've made, and that's just me and my ability to discern certain things, the connections that I can make without verbalizing it, I can't understand why people aren't there yet. They haven't made that connection that I have to spell it out for them. So it's how easy it is to just dismiss that sometimes, that we actually have an it factor. We just don't know how to label it, or we don't think that it's marketable. But I think that's part of your journey, I think, is realizing that actually I know some stuff. That was even some of the imposter syndrome of me doing a podcast. Like, well, nobody's going to want to hear what I have to say. And chances are people won't, but that's okay. But it's like, but no. And as I started doing it, I'm like, no, actually, I actually have some wisdom to share. I can't help but have wisdom to share. I've had a lot of experiences that people would have to pay a lot of money to duplicate and earn that wisdom. So I think that's what you were doing while you're in this blast zone, is you're learning all these things. You're taking in so many experiences that it just clicked. It was easy. And so that's my read on what you just said, as far as where I can relate.
True. It's so true. I really just, to me, it was where I grew up. We grow up as kids, but then we also grow up in our jobs, right? And so where I grew up, I was just so exposed to the C-suite. I was every single day in that space. And I'm a highly intelligent person. I'm just soaking it all in. I'm taking it in. I'm understanding how to navigate and get things done. And really, if you're going to be successful in a corporate space, then you're selling all day, every day. That's how you're influencing, you're getting things done. It is all day, every day. You're actually doing sales inside your job if you're going to be successful. So to me, it seemed like common knowledge. And I was actually even a little, I don't want to say embarrassed, but they're asking me for this, and and it's also, it's a bit of a female thing, like, oh, it's nothing, and the folks at the conference were like, no, Angelique, this isn't, we actually don't know. So it was interesting. I took that on, and I had 2 different businesses for a long time. I was running 2 different businesses simultaneously. Talk about not a good idea. But the other side of it of doing the training around marketing, marketing, B2B sales, scaling the professional firms, that was something that I never intended to go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So it was almost always like, okay, I'm doing some of this, but I've got my corporate clients over here. And then eventually just it started to just grow and grow and grow. And the community was growing and I loved it so much. I do still love it. I actually do think it was what I was meant to do. I really do feel that. It just is my thing, just like your thing. It's like, it's your superpower.
Right.
So that's how I ended up here. But I also think it's important as entrepreneurs and as business owners. There's that great quote. I think it comes from Selling the Invisible. And it's that if you listen closely, your customers explain your business to you. And I think, you could replace customers with the market explains your business to you. And I think that's really important that you're paying attention to the signals that you're getting from the marketplace. You can't love your baby so much that you can't hear what the market is telling you.
Yeah, I look at it a different approach. Well, similar, but in the sense that we don't brand ourselves, our customers brand us. So are we delivering in the product and the experience that is having them brand us the way we want to be branded? So if you approach it from there and say, no, we're going to be this company, your customer or your client may ultimately say, no, you're something completely different. This is where we get our value from. So you have to kind of think of it from their point of view. They're going to tell everybody else who you are. It's not so much what you say, it's what they say about you. So now that
it's interesting. The name BoldHaus actually came about because of exactly what you're saying. We hired a branding company who we love. They're phenomenal. But this was 6-7 years ago. We first hired them to rebrand the company. And we went through a pretty lengthy process, really thorough process. And the first couple of ideas that they brought to us after we had already gone through sort of a 6-month journey, they brought us some ideas. And let's just say those ideas fell flat. They did not land with me even a little bit. And in my spirited feedback in that meeting about these names not landing, I blurted out in a very animated way. I said, how many times do I have to tell you that our clients are bold and they see us as their forever home? How many times do I have to tell you that? And there was a woman who was on the branding team. Her name is Cindy. God bless her. And the second I said that, she ended the meeting. She goes, I've got it. This meeting is over. We'll be back tomorrow. I know what your brand name is. And so the very next day she was back. So, but it was our clients who told us that they're like, Angelique, we go to these other companies to maybe ghostwrite a book or to do this or to do that. But no matter what, you guys are so amazing. You always keep us on the cutting edge. You are my home. I always feel when I'm here with the gatherings that like I'm coming home. This is my home base. And they said that. So they did. The community told us what our brand was.
That's great.
And then we just, worked it. But it literally, people say that, Rufus. And in our case, literally.
Right. But it's interesting how you got there too. It's like a certain series of frustrations and events had to fail in order to get to that success. And that's just some of the best things that have happened throughout my career could have never been written into a business plan. So anyway.
1,000%. Oh my gosh.
So now that you've built it, how do you exit it? What's next for you? I mean, is this something you can simply just walk away from and it runs itself? Or are you still kind of entrenched in the business?
Yeah, I'm a little entrenched, but we actually made it's interesting you asked that question right now, because we actually spent the last year getting all of my knowledge into an updated learning management system that will continue to go through further iterations with AI and all of that good stuff. But it took about 18 months to take so much of my brain and really build it into this learning management system that's massive. Like, it's just insane. And then we restructure the way we do our trainings so that we can get to a point that I don't need to be at these trainings
Mhm.
at all,
Mhm.
that they are just so dialed in that I won't have to be there so that the business can completely run without me. The
Mhm.
thing is, it can do it now. Here's the thing: not only can it do it now, but it had to do it now
Mhm.
this year for a little while. But right now, I'm still part of the brand. I'm still the Tony Robbins in the Tony Robbins brand. I'm still the Angelique in BoldHaus. So I have a lot of personal brand in it. People hear me speak at conferences, then they want to know that they're going to hear from me at our growth summit or in our go week training that we have, or they want to know that I'm still there. We'll have to continue over the next 5 to 10 years to kind of pull me further and further out. But the thing is, we built it in such a way that I don't have to be a part of it. So right now, I have faculty that can do all of the training without me. And we're
Mhm.
going to continue to expand that faculty. I just happen to really like being there.
Sure.
I really enjoy
Right.
teaching. I really enjoy working with the clients and helping them have those, like, oh, now I understand why nothing we're doing is working. So I like that, but I don't have to be. And I think that's, I think that's a great place to be compared to where I was back in 2007.
I think the goal is to have your company prepared to exit without having to exit. So it's kind of like what
Right.
I say with retirement. I use the term financial independence, where financial independence
Mm,
is described as where work is optional and retirement's affordable. Work if you want to
mm.
work. I'm not going to tell you have
I
to,
love
but
that.
if you, for some reason you couldn't go to work one day, at least we have a solid backup plan. Or if you have other passions that you want to pursue, you now have the resources in which to do that. But you said it had to be done. So what was kind of that catalyst that brought you to the point to where, like, let's get this,
Ugh.
let's start? Is the idea to pursue other passions or maybe work part time or at some point?
Yeah, so it was a couple, yeah, I mean, it was a couple of things. I mean, one, we needed to do this so that the business could further scale.
Hmm.
So we had
Yeah.
scaled, and then sort of plateaued. And then I had to have that sort of come to Jesus moment of, if we're going to do one of these again, then something's going to have to change in the business model, because this business model is kind of here, but I'd like the business to be here. So we're going to have to make some changes to it. So that's number one. For scalability would be great. Number two, at some point, I would like to exit the business. I
Right.
would like it to be a saleable asset, and I would like to have that opportunity down the road one day to do that. And then number three, I had a health issue this year, and so I got hit pretty hard at the beginning of this year with a major health issue that really knocked me on my rear end for 2 months. And it was interesting because it's kind of it's kind of the expression that you just shared in terms of it's retirement's optional and affordable,
Mhm.
and or retirement's optional, and however you
Work
you
is
just said
optional,
that, it was
retirement's
great.
affordable. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. And so it was sort of like that, in that we had built the business that I had been methodically extricating myself from so much over the last 4 or 5 years, really ever since the pandemic, to be
Mhm.
honest with you.
Mhm.
And so for 5 years of just continuously saying, how do I get this off my plate? How do I get this off my plate? How do I get this off my plate?
Right.
And so when I had that health crisis, very, like, totally unexpectedly, literally, actually, I was sitting at this desk when it happened. And next thing you know, I was being rushed to the hospital. And my business continued to go on for, those 2.5 months with really very little from me. There was an acute period of probably 3 weeks or so where there was zilch from me. And then as I started to kind of be like, okay, then I was able to answer questions if my team wanted So my COO would bring to me, hey, option A or option B here. And I could say option B. But I mean, I was literally, I mean, it could be like in 15 minutes. I could give a thumbs up, a thumbs down, a left or a right, a red or a blue. It wasn't, I didn't have to touch anything. And the clients were able to continue to get the services that they needed. Our programs continued to run, our marketing and sales continued to run. And so that was actually, it allowed me to focus on my health and make a full recovery because I had built the systems and I had built the team and we had it all in place, and it did not happen overnight. And I think that is something that folks just wait and wait and they play roulette
Yeah.
with the health of their business.
Especially when it's so attached to us being there. And I mean, on some level, we are there to rescue the people that work for us anytime they don't, or they look to us to make these decisions. But in a weird way, and it's kind of, I hate to say it as a gift, but it's almost, you got smacked in the face with this, that you had to deal with this reality. They did not have the
Yeah.
option. So you're no longer here. They have to make
Right.
decisions. And I bet they
That's
probably
right.
learned a lot about themselves in doing
Yeah.
so. And I think you got to
Yeah.
learn a lot about them in your absence and be like, wow, I can let go and they've got this. I got really good people. Or maybe a combination of, here's where everything started to break down. We need to fix that because this could happen again. And I think
That's
you
right.
had that little early warning that basically says, okay, we need to kind of take this up here and download this into some kind of an AI, some kind of continuity of me, to where you're not always coming to
Yeah.
me if you need the answers. You at least have my wisdom, you have my insights, but not directly through me. And I think that's really
Yeah.
smart.
It's true. This year, it ended up being a surprise. You go through, you have the fire drills at school, right? You
Yes.
have the
Yeah.
fire drills. And then when there actually is a fire in the cafeteria and everybody does have to get out of the building, that's when you really know that it worked, that that the plans that you had in place. And
Yes.
so that
Yeah.
for us was, this is not a drill. The bell is going off and this is not a drill. But all the practice, all the
Right.
things that we had done, that pressure test actually
Right.
worked. And
But
that was really interesting.
even in doing what you are doing right now, forced you to make these changes, which will make your
Mhm.
business much more valuable, because the more you exit from the day to day of having to be that person, the more you can hand over the keys to the kingdom and say, okay, we have this running and it's humming. I'm now taking the role of the investor of my business, not the owner operator.
Yeah.
You can now be the investor and take my spot, but don't mess anything up. It's running perfectly. And
That's
before
right.
then, you're like, hey,
That's
let me
right.
go ahead and say this business, and I'll agree to work 3 to 5 years to transition and make sure everybody's trained up. Well, that would have lowered
That's
the
right.
value of the business. So I think that you're on the
Yeah.
right path. And again, preparing your company for exit without having to exit, and do it as long as you want to do it, but do the things that only uniquely you can do. And that's what
Yeah.
you're starting to find, new ways that you can outsource things that used to be uniquely you. And now you can get to go
Yeah,
discover
that's
all the
true.
things that are undiscovered that you can do.
Yeah.
How exciting.
Yeah, it's so funny. I love I know there's the quote from Warren Buffett that asked the question, what would you do differently in your business if you were planning to sell it tomorrow? And
Right.
I think that's a very powerful question. But for me, I had a hard time, 7, 8 years ago. I'd asked myself that question and I couldn't necessarily see it. I tell this story all the time. But I grew up in a time where the Oprah show was always on my grandmother's television, like every day. What was it, 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock or whatever it was, every day? Either my mother or my grandmother would have it on the
Right.
television. It was always just kind of in the background, right? So it was something that was there, part of my life. And of course, it was one of the most watched shows in the United States and then in other parts of the world. But the final season that Oprah was on, she did she had done 25 years, and then her final season was kind of a big deal because it was the last year as she was going on to create the own network. So they didn't just film the show, they also filmed a behind the scenes of the Oprah show for that year. So for the whole year, you got the main show and then you got the behind the scenes show. And I was already an entrepreneur at that point when that came on. And I started watching the behind the scenes episodes. And at first it was just get the popcorn. I'm just want something easy to watch in the evenings. But after maybe the second episode or so, I had this sort of light bulb moment of, oh my gosh, we're getting to see, granted, it's edited for TV. I'm not that naive, but we're getting a glimpse, even if it's just this sliver of a glimpse, into the way that a billionaire runs her business. And we're seeing the behind the scenes stuff of this. And she's not the one who's licking holiday cards to go out to her, friends and family and fans or whatever. She's not the one who's having to empty the trash can under her desk or go through QuickBooks with the bookkeeper, right? So I remember thinking at that stage,
So true.
right? I mean, but it was amazing. So I ended up getting a notebook out. I had this notebook by my television, and I'd watch the show and I would write down all of these things that she was doing or really more that she wasn't doing.
Right.
Like all of the things she wasn't doing that were happening around her. And I just remember thinking to myself, well, isn't it interesting? She doesn't have stuff everywhere on her desk. She doesn't even have a laptop on her desk. And everything is happening, and she's not writing emails and stuck in her inbox from 6 a.m. until 10 o'clock at night. And this entire network television show is running, and she's starting a network, and she's not buried all day in an inbox. And it just got me thinking in a different way. And then I'm a big fan of something called solution-focused management, which has a lot of principles to it. But one of my favorite principles is if you want to create a solution somewhere in your business, something isn't the way you want it to be. Instead of spending hours or days or weeks or months trying to figure out what's wrong and why it's not working, instead find one other place in the business that there's an exception to the rule, that thing is working. So let's say there's something that you just want to get off your plate and you can't figure out how to do it. You go find the thing that you did successfully get off your plate, and you ask yourself, what was true about that made it possible? And then you start applying that solution to the problem instead of focusing on the root cause of the problem, which is what most people try to do.
Right.
And that's how I essentially created business continuity. You asked me that in sort of the green room, if you will.
Right.
So what I did in the business 5 years ago is I started looking at everything I was doing. And then I would say, okay, well, I'm not doing this. I managed to get this off my plate. So what was true about this that I got off my plate? And then I found one other thing that I could make that true about that thing. And I just chipped away. And then as soon as I got freedom from that, it was like, okay, let's find the next thing. And let's look at a parallel from the things that are off my plate and apply that thinking to this thing. And and I did that for year after year after year after year. So that was really just a solution-focused management approach.
I love that. Yeah, I as you were telling me that, I was thinking the saying, Frank Sinatra doesn't move his own pianos. So yeah, same concept. So
I forgot about that quote. I love that quote. Yeah, see? And that's what I'm saying. I think entrepreneurs move way too many of their own pianos.
Oh, absolutely, because we're control freaks and we need to be heavily medicated. So anyway. Yes. Well, I think what I am hearing from you with what you're doing with your exit strategy, with your continuity plan, that I think is most exciting is that you know what your genius is, but there's still that unknown genius that you have yet to discover. And that's exciting for me. I think that's going to be really exciting for me to witness, knowing you and being in organizations with you, is to see what's next for you. So I'm excited for you now that you've kind of cleared the runway, cleared the path. You get to go explore what's next. And I think you have so much more to give. And I'm glad that you have the systems in place that you can continue to add value to so many companies. But really, that's where the juice is. What's next for Angelique? So I appreciate you being on my podcast. And I let this go a little bit longer because this was just too good. and maybe we'll do it again sometime. But
Awesome. Thanks for
I'll
having
put
me.
all your information on the screen. But what's the best place for people to reach you, or how do you want
The
them to reach
two
out to you?
are, yeah, so the two, you can check us out at boldhaus.com. But the other great way to connect with us, I'm the only Angelique Rewers over on LinkedIn.
Mm.
So that is a really great place to find me.
Yeah, I'd like to say the same thing about me, but there's actually 3 Rufus Cressons out there, and
Oh,
one's my father, and
there's
the other one's
truly
my
just one
son.
of you.
So yeah, you got a 1 in 3 chance you'll get me if you Google search me. But yeah, we'll put that information on there. And thank you so much for
Awesome.
being on,
Thanks.
and we'll do this again sometime.
Sounds good.
Thanks for tuning in to Constructive Interference. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow visionary. Keep dreaming big, and remember, the only limits are the ones you set for yourself. Until next time, stay sharp.